Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Meki, live from the Sydney studios in Australia. Jump into the chat room at freedomslips.com while we're on air. You can listen from there. And also follow us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Our website, shinysideout.net, has the show archives, notes and links we paste into the chat during the show. Meki knows how many ways there are to listen to us. If you live in Kentucky, you can hear us on FM, WZZR 101.3. You can get an app. I'm going to read them all out. Revolution Radio, TalkStream Live, TuneIn.com, Radio Tuner, Spreaker.com, iHeart, Live 365, and, drumroll please, no, there's no drumroll. Let's put that in post. Shiny Side Out. Available on all platforms. At home, you can listen to us on a Grace tabletop radio or driving around in your General Motors vehicle with a receiver-enabled radio. All are revolutions in radio. You can buy a CD of your favorite host for the 2013 season. Each CD costs roughly $30. Check out the info on the station's website. The number to call in if you're in the USA, US of A, 347-688-2902, or via Skype. Just add Freedom Screen. Solaris had an awesome show again. Yet again, is it not like the best show ever? Right? It is. And her guest today, Jerry Avalos, awesome. And I think Vanessa was on there as well. Hey, awesome stuff. You know, I still love it. You know, I get to listen to another great host show before mine. I usually fall asleep after mine. And I hope you don't fall asleep out there. It's important. Now, unfortunately, Meki isn't with us tonight. He's still in transit. He was hoping to make it home for tonight's show, but he's probably flying over my head as we speak. Will land in about 20 minutes and then has about another hour's drive home from the airport. And so I don't think he's going to make it. If he can, he will for the last minute or two. But, he messaged me a little earlier on from Brisbane. And, of course, we have a zero policy for mobile services in flight, so he's unable to take part. And certainly at 35,000 feet, or 40,000 feet for that matter, you can't contact a cell phone tower from your phone. That's a good segue. If I've ever heard that's a segue, that's definitely a segue. Now, today's show is show number 114, or 14 and 100, as our absent Meki would say. You know, the segue, I was alerted to this during the week, and Joanna from the Wang and Tugra UFO group that I hang out with, she's posted something to me just a little earlier on today, and it's pretty good. I'm really, really impressed by exactly what it means. See, she posted a link to me about MH370. Oh, we have our first caller on the Roundtable tonight. By the way, it's a Roundtable, just letting everyone know. And Joe, are you with us?
Dave, what's happening, buddy?
I'm missing Meki, and I know all our listeners are missing Meki as well for the constant bombardment.
I didn't know you were there all alone.
No, I'm here all alone.
I had to call in right away.
Good idea.
I can't have you all alone over there.
Yeah, man. Look, it's appreciated. Thanks so much.
How are you, mate?
I'm doing pretty good. G'day. How you doing?
Same to you. Doing all right. Yeah. I'm just wrapping up my day.
Oh, well, of course. It's what, 11:30 or something?
No, it's 2 a.m. for me.
Oh, you're East Coast.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Such a big difference between you and me. Where are you? In the middle of your day, afternoon?
4 p.m.
4 p.m. Wow, what a difference.
You know what? I think it's incredible. When I was growing up, you would if you were to call another country, you would have an ISDN line. You'd have to book one in advance. Our telco would call you back when there was a line available. Then you would provide the number to them, and they would put you through. So it wasn't done at your extension, like your handset. It was done by the telco.
Yeah.
Then when you'd have if you called for an hour, you'd have an hour worth of awkward conversation where you would expect the person's reply and they just wouldn't. Right? And then you go, oh, hey, that's right, they're calling from overseas, so it's going to be like a 3-second delay before they answer me.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is instantaneous. I still love this
incredible.
technology. It's almost like magic.
I do too.
Mm-hmm.
I do too. I know there's good, there's a good and bad for everything. Obvious, there's downsides of technology, but this is definitely one of the plus sides for me. This is really firsthand proof for me how the internet really does bring the world together. Mm-hmm. In a very easy manner too. How we can do this and broadcast worldwide. It's incredible.
It sure is. Look, knowing how big the links are required to actually have a fully operational internet, the actual backbone, just knowing how big those links have to be. When I was putting together companies international links together between different branches of operating businesses, I know how big those links had to be, and they were tiny, absolutely minuscule. It was the only step up from Morse code. That's how slow they were, right? Wait for this, right? So, I used to give presentations to people on what the internet was and how big it really was and what our little tiny piece of it really was in respect to the size of it. So I gave them a proportionality demonstration drawing a very small circle inside a very large circle, saying the large circle is the internet bandwidth that's available to the military, and then the public use of it is only a very small, like imagine a yard circle, a circle of 1 yard across, a diameter of it, and then a very small, you get a dime and circle that around it inside that. That's the use of the public space, the bandwidth available to us. Thinking about what this conversation costs the internet, it's almost nothing. Thinking about what's available from a military perspective, I think it's a truly amazing thing that we get to backbone or, hang off the back of it.
Oh yes, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, my oldest child is 10 years old, and that was, that goes by rather quickly. Mm-hmm. But it was just not too long ago, just a couple months ago, we were talking about technology. It all started where we were talking about vinyl albums, the music albums. Mm-hmm. And she understood how that was an old technology relative to a DVD or a CD. She didn't quite understand how we went from a disc like vinyl to a cassette or an 8-track. She didn't quite get it, and it really blew her mind when, and mine too, that just 10 years ago, cell phones were relatively new. Mm-hmm. Not everyone had one, and most people's phones in their homes, at least here, most of them were still attached to the wall with a cord. Exactly. It wasn't all antennas, and said in just 10 years, so much has changed. Mm-hmm. I remember it wasn't that long ago where having just a cordless phone in your home was a big deal, where I was able to walk 100 feet away or 100 meters, if that,
Mm-hmm.
And that was remarkable then. And now we have so much right in the palm of our hand. We have anything you want to know.
It is such, you're right, it's such a huge hop, skip and jump away from where we were. I DJ'd a couple of times. I've still got all my crates of records.
And, very cool.
And I know what vinyl means. I know what it means it's basically an FM signal. It's analog, mm-hmm. Actually, really, but it's vibrations through a needle, yeah? And I worked for the company that created the compact disc and the cassette. Actually worked for them.
Is that right?
Yeah.
No kidding.
No kidding. And they also made one of the first PCs, the commercially available PCs, as IBM clones, not IBMs, but IBM clones. And same company. And they also made the sharpest thing ever made on the planet, which if you dropped it, it would travel straight through your leg. And,
wow.
And fall onto the floor, of course, but it would go through tissue like it wasn't even there. And some of the things that they found with that was. Remember, have you ever heard about? I digress, but I'll get us back to it. Have you ever seen that thing where they could move single atoms around with a machine and construct little pyramids and things? Do you ever see that?
I believe I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that was actually a side effect, an unknown, undocumented feature of the first machine that was designed to. If anyone Googles this, they'll know who it is. It was Philips Industries, and they sharpened the tip down to a single atom, and as they ran this pencil-like device, a couple of microns across the surface, it would measure magnetically the differential between, and you could detect where the atoms were. And so visually on a computer, they could make a representation of what the surface looked like. Although only after traveling for 20 seconds across, very slowly, not even perceivable by the eye, it would pick up a stray atom off the surface, and then suddenly the image would become blurry. And one of the scientists, what do they call them? The propeller heads, the boffins. One of the tech guys said, "Well, why don't we just shoot, change the polarity of the pencil thing, right? The sharpest instrument on the planet." And they did, and it let go of the atom that was dangling off the end. Imagine if you had a ball magnet on the end of a bar magnet, and you moved it slightly, you would see this thing rock around.
Yes.
Well, that was causing the imperfections in the data. So every once in a while they had to flick this atom off the end whenever they pick up a stray. One of the guys went, "Hang on, we just picked up an atom and placed it somewhere. Why don't we build something?" And so they did. They built something and then had to put it through a scanning electron microscope to actually see what it was they built. And they estimated that they could only ever measure it magnetically because it would take them more than 1 million years of moving one atom at a time to actually see something. It would take that long.
That's incredible.
It is something. It's amazing. So I work for that company, right? And I just love working for people in the forefront doing good things with good technology, right? So let's go back to the LP, right? So from the LP, taking it, remember the original thing was a wax. It was a Graham Bell, wasn't it? That made the wax cylinder.
So.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we turned it from a wax cylinder into one that you could do in home recordings, like a DVD recorder, but it was an LP. You could do it at home. We made that was actually made as well. Then they made the pressed vinyl. So they took that away from you, so you couldn't make them yourself. Decided to make them in a company, and they'd make the master, and then they'd press from the negative all of the LPs out, and they'd sell them, which is great. The change, of course, came from 8-track originally, which was 4 stereo channels in your car, for instance, a conveniently square location where you could listen to this stuff. And I actually had a Zoo album.
That was a big deal. That was a big deal, 4 channels.
It was.
Hi-fi, yeah.
Yeah. Quadrophonia. You could have not just stereo, but you could have placement inside the vehicle. Now, that disappeared because it was, terrible. You could only go one way through the tape. The actual platform was good. The transport was terrible. So that changed the direction. It steered it away from the 8-track, went down to just stereo, where they could have had a thicker tape. The mechanism was thick enough. But that, once again, that was Philips. They made the compact cassette. And then they went, well, that's not quite good enough. We're not getting... Cassette tape was terrible. It was only 22 kilohertz. Awful sound. if you have a 20, if you happen to purchase an MP3 online legitimately, and it was rendered not in 44.1, but 22 kilohertz, you would complain about it. I'm sure even the worst if you're hearing.
I'm sure the artist would today as well.
Yeah, they'd spin around in their grave, I swear.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So being 44.1 and stereo was a step up to go to compact disc, but then came this odd downturn of the technology where we could then make it portable. I'm eliminating all of the Sony products, but to make it portable to go to any device, so you have one copy, but you could have it as an MP3, put on here and there, whatever. That changed because people, people were happy doing it 128 kilobits per second. And there is enormous loss at the high end when you do that. But if you're doing it 196 or even higher than that, the files get a bit too big. So it was this fight for space. How many songs can I get on my device? The device space chose what we were going to choose next as being the most or the ultimate way we would drive the product. Similarly was VHS and Beta. The competition between the two. Beta was a far superior product, delivering higher resolution and frame rates to the monitor, to your video presentation. However, VHS, with all of its issues, flooded the market, beat the Beta device out of the market. But film studios still use Beta tapes, up until digital came in.
Mm-hmm.
So because they could run it, I think, 9 times quicker than the play rate in your device, and you get HD, or as close as you could. So I think that's extraordinary. Like we made these decisions based on our wallets. We couldn't afford too much storage, so we chose a lower spec without complaining. And only audiophiles would render their MP3s at a higher rate because you can actually hear the difference if they had an MP3. If a true audiophile would probably want to have, play the CD instead because it's truly superior. But this is the thing. Who's bought a CD lately, right? Have you?
No. We were having that was in the discussion too. That
Mm-hmm.
we had to go to a music store, a store specifically that sold music, and my children were beside themselves. They grew up in the world that it's a click of a button for anything. Yeah. For a movie, a show, an album, a song. Yeah. And to think it wasn't just any store you had to go to. I had to go to a specific store, a music store, and hopefully they had the album you wanted, or you had to order it.
Oh yes, that's right. Yep. Yep. Exactly. I remember having to order things internationally.
Or maybe you drive to the next town over and check that music store.
Because they didn't have computers in store either.
Yeah, this is how it had to be.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that long ago.
No. Now, I remember being in California. I went to school over there. I was fortunate enough. And there were 24-hour record stores. And if you were listening to a song on the radio, you could go, "Oh, that's awesome. I want a copy of that." And you would drive down to the record store and ask for it. And if they had it, they'd get it. If they didn't have it, they'd ring around the stores locally within your, proximity. And if they said, it was at another store local to you, like Van Nuys or something like that, yeah, sure. You could get down there. I lived in Anaheim Hills. So I could get down to Anaheim. I could get to, Tustin Avenue. I could get over to Tustin or Sepulveda or something like that, and I could pick it up. If I want to go down the valley, that's a bit much of a hike, but I could get down there, and I could buy my album. And I think that was something else. It had this touchy-feely ownership thing. You owned it. I've still got mine. I've got all of mine.
I have all my vinyl as well. And I kind of was growing up when we were moving away from vinyl. Yeah. But I still have a lot of the older music still sounds good on vinyl, if you could play it right. So a lot of my older albums, I do have a few good players, but they still do. There still are a few artists here in the States that still produce vinyl albums.
Awesome.
I just picked one up 2 years ago. It's probably the last, and it was a new vinyl album. It was a new release.
Wow.
And it was on a 180 gram album, and it sounds great, but it has that authentic. It was an acoustic album, so you really have that hollow sound, that kind of like a dry echo. It's that sound you lose with digital. Yes, well, I understand now. You understand the terminology.
I do. I know exactly what it is.
And digital is fantastic. It's convenient in many, many ways, but there is some loss. There's a different sound to digital.
The problem
than there is to analog.
You're absolutely right. Now, we were playing these albums through wooden speaker boxes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's also a big difference, I have to tell you. So they weren't made of MDF. They were made of actual wood, timber. If you were unlucky, maybe chipboard. But they were, the warmth of the note coming from the speaker was found typically only with a particular manufacturer, because the density of the wood, the type of wood it was, of course, the kind of internal baffling they did, the shape of the speaker box. All of these are extremely. I mean, a Hawk, if he's listening, if he listens to this back again, he's going to go, "Yeah, you're right." And I recognize that those musician terms you use, because I had a band for a while, and I did all the mastering, and I know exactly what it's like. I wrote all the music, but I know what it's like when you're trying to describe something. You're completely right. It either has a bit more air around it. It's maybe a little hollower. You can talk about wet and dry. Dry means that it has no effects on it at all. Wet is how much of a percentage of those effects you've applied to it. We can really hear it. If the big test, I actually asked everyone. I said, "Do you know what a real snare drum sounds like?" And they go, "Yeah, sure." And I go, "You point," because it's all lies, right? You point out a song that you can hear the snare drum in, that you know what that snare is, and that you think that's the sound that a snare drum makes. And they'll give me some song, and I go, "Here, look, this is a song from whatever it is." Okay, great. All right. Now, I'll play you a sound, and you tell me if it's the same sound, and it's so not the same sound. The snare is the most EQ'd and placed, filtered, compressed instrument in the whole of the musician's kit. Because that one is the one that it produces a sound that's usually over the vocal, in the same frequencies, and it has to be tucked away. It has to be moved and filtered and dressed so that it's not going to be too prominent in the track. And it's the one that no one actually hears the original.
And it fits nicely. You could it's an adjustable sound.
And you still recognize it for what it is. Yeah, you can sneak in. It's like a clap. Yeah. So it depends on the room it's in, and it's really cool. There's some extraordinary tricks about how to mic up drum kits so they sound fantastic. And
when it comes to the music, I'm a big fan of live music or a live album.
Yeah.
I prefer to stay as much away from the studio albums. There's just so much done to them these days. I just feel there's such a big difference between a performing artist and a recording artist. There's a lot done in a studio, and I'm not trying to take anything away. There are very talented artists that put out excellent studio albums, but there's something about an artist who could record it live, and you have to do it all in one shot, and that's really where the true talent can come out, if they could pull it all out and make it sound special enough to record. And there's very few of those these days. That's a rare breed these days.
Hey Joe, you know that you're right. There is a huge difference between recording and performing artists. There aren't many recording artists that will get up on stage without, let's call it, not a backing vocal, a replacement vocal for them on the same track. So recording artists will have their vocal audio on a track that will be either muted or brought forward, and their vocal on stage will be brought back in case they're not in tune, in case they're having a bad day. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's natural for a recording artist to do that, because they've done it all in there and they've spent, 6 months getting the one song right, and it's right now. Yeah. Auto-tune is fantastic. There's the secrets of mastering where you can place the same vocal on slightly to the left or right of the original and detune it double the distance it takes to reduce the original pitch down. So it's an old mastering trick. If they're a little off, you can copy the vocal and detune it enough and it'll pull the original one down. It'll mix it as a halfway point. So not many people can hear it in the songs. I hear it every single time, whether it's wet or dry. You can hear it.
Yeah, you know your music pretty well. You know your sound.
Yeah, one of my friends, you know the Gautier song?
Yes.
Yeah, that was my friend mastered it. And
oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so we go back, we go by 30 years back, yeah? And he's worked for everybody. So I can hear his work.
Oh, you could recognize it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know it well then.
Yeah. There's one band in particular that has, they don't record anymore because one of the lead singer became political and went into the political stream, and he was obviously signed away his ability to write political music anymore. But that's Midnight Oil. So if you know the band Midnight Oil, the lead singer is now in politics. But their claim to fame was every single thing that they did was done in one take. No doubling, no extra, no effects. It was all live in the studio. And performing artists can knock those out in no time at all.
Yeah, you just impressed me with that. That's a fact I did not know. That's very impressive.
Thanks, man.
Do one take, man.
Yeah, just one take.
You know your stuff, buddy.
Yeah. And so I heard him talking about it on the radio he was interviewed for about an hour, and they did a couple of they did some musical history on him. Yeah, they said, "Oh, how about this song? Surely that breaking glass, in I think it's U.S. Forces song. That breaking glass you hear at the end." He said, "We broke a glass." He said they had to do that, I think, 2 or 3 times to get the timing right. But they didn't loop it. They didn't place it in afterwards. It was done live during the take. So that's something. And, my hat is off to a performing artist that can make it sound the same the next time. But because what happens is when a band is up on stage, and you can talk to them, if you ever interview them, I'd love to have a music show one day. But if you have a band that's been together, it doesn't matter who they are. They could be U2, or just a garage band. It doesn't make any difference. But you ask them, what was that one performance that it just worked? And they'll tell you which one it was. They'll all agree. It's because they joined together and became one thing that was like one mind, one connected, like telepathically. It was like this energy that was greater than the sum of them, and they were perfect. And it's not like a sprinter who can get it wrong a little bit or get it right or have a great run. This is something else. It requires all the members of the band to be part of it. And when they're all joined together, the music is so much more amazing. And, I found that if you ever hear Hunters and Collectors, there's a song by them, which I forget the title right now. There's one version of that song which is the best one, and it's not the studio version. It's one of their live performances. And they claimed the same thing. They said, every song we played that night was absolutely perfect. We did it perfectly. If it was in the studio, they would have told us, you know, that was it. That was the take. Right there. That's it. But it was magical. There's something even better than a mastering engineer tapping the hi-hat to the left, you know, a little bit, the whole track, just a little bit to make it work. There's something better than that. It's when it flows, when it's dynamic.
There is something, and you could have it. And it comes quick. It actually comes and goes quicker than it comes. But I believe there is that inspiration moment, the muses, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. There's times when a band will get it, and they can't duplicate it, and it'll be a one-take performance, whether it be live or not. And sometimes it's just perfect harmony.
Joe, that was
wonderful.
That was the word I was looking for. They can't duplicate it.
Yeah. And they'll admit it too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just say it was just something that night where it goes through them. And you know, you're a musician, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we love music, right? We love it. That's why we create it. But I want it to love me. You know, that's what I work hard for. Is you're creating for more than just yourself. You know, especially when you're with your band, you're trying to achieve that sound all in one. You know, all together, all instruments becoming one sound.
That's right.
And vocals included. When the voice is used as an instrument, there you go. You're off to a good start.
Absolutely. The thing that I've listened to a lot of drum solos, and one of the guys that played the best that I've ever heard live was the drummer from the Radiators, the band from the 80s, and I used to do write-ups for them. I used to go to all their gigs and do write-ups, and there was one gig in particular where they did a drum solo and he just kept going. And, you know, they might have had showers, played a game of correspondence chess with someone from Russia, and came back on stage and he was still going. And he had the crowd. It was amazing. And he wasn't doing too much. He was doing just what felt right. And I was astounded because I do a lot of at the time I was writing electronica, and he was doing things that I couldn't do, and I was listening to that from a perspective of how do I do that? What he's doing, I just can't get my head around. And that was I never use loops, but what he was able to achieve was, and this is what you hear all drummers do, if they're able to flex and reduce, increase and reduce the feeling of that what seems like a straight 4 bars, but they don't. If you actually play it down against a click track, which they don't have in their head, you'll see how it's irregular and how their brain caught it up and they let it go a little bit and then they caught it up again. And it's the flow of the track. And it's imperceptible. But only when it's against something that's, you know, super sensitive. So do you actually see this? It's organic. And that's it. I love the organic nature of music.
Yes, as do I. And especially with the live performances, I know, well, not firsthand. I've never been on stage at some of these large arenas where I was imagining the drum solo you were describing, a larger venue. I know that they feed off the crowd. It goes back and forth. It's a lot of the musicians will say it was the crowd that was actually playing that instrument.
Wow.
You know, there was you know where they say I don't know what was going through me last night, but I was hitting every note, and I was feeding off the crowd, and it was going back and forth. And there's something there, because it's more often than not, those are usually those wonderful performances that that last the ages.
Yeah,
but I'm holding out a little bit too, because I spent a decade working for MTV in New York.
Awesome.
So I got to do a lot of wonderful things on the audio end, but I was there not from the beginning, but I left right when the transition to digital was happening.
Oh,
is when I stopped being there. So everything I did was audio. I'm sorry, analog, and pretty much I still am a lot in nature. I'm still analog. Like I still play vinyl and a lot of things like that. I'm an acoustic kind of guy. If I play the guitar, I prefer acoustic over electric, but acoustic electric I use. I don't play the drums as much anymore, but music used to be my thing. That I thought I was going to be in it forever, but it doesn't always work out that way. And I also realized that really wasn't my dream at all. To do that forever. I'm more of a learner, and it was I felt there was nothing more for me to learn at that point, and I like to move on. I'm constantly evolving.
Can I? And that's good to hear. It's good to hear, and I'm really impressed that with the working through analog and MTV, it would have been awesome.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a good time.
Have you? Would you? Let's put it this way: we love analog and how it sounds, and I've described how the construction of the speaker can really do or die, it can make or break your listening experience. Now, have you found because my impression, I'm agreeing with it in the question, it's my perspective, yeah? So have you found that there isn't an adequate representation in a digital world of a speaker that's doing justice to the music?
That is a very, very good question. I would have to say, in a quick answer, I would say there are some incredibly good sounding speakers in the digital world. However, I feel a lot of them are duplicating a sound, almost where if you have a good digital camera and you take a picture, it will focus on the people in the picture and not so much in the background, whereas a cell phone will focus on everything in the automatic picture, and it kind of makes the whole picture look okay. Yeah. Where digital sound kind of makes the whole range of the music sound okay. But there's that, again, I'll refer to the live sound, where it doesn't quite sound that live, whereas if I turn the lights down a little bit and I put on a live vinyl album, you could almost imagine yourself being in the same room, because you really hear that music right there. And maybe a little bit because it comes off the needle as well. You could kind of hear it without amplification. I think there's amazing digital sounds. I think there are some that can carry a wide spectrum of and wavelengths, whereas 10 years ago we needed a bass speaker, a mid-range, a tweeter for high range, where now one speaker has the composition, the structure, how they're made these days with the high-end metals, that now one tiny speaker can carry the whole spectrum of sound. So it's very beneficial, and there are great sounds to me, but it just doesn't capture it the way they used to. As you were mentioning with speaker boxes, there's a big difference between one made of walnut or maple
Yes.
as opposed to a composite board. Or I want mine of maple, like a nice guitar. You know, I want that resonating sound. I think Bose products are fantastic. But again, they kind of trick us because they excel in the technology of projecting the sound. So it's kind of giving us the appearance that it's a full sound. Kind of like an optical illusion, but audio.
Yeah. You know, I've got a set of nice 2020s on my desk. And I've always written with, you know, 2020, anyone out there who's not musical, basically I can hear outside of 2020, but most music is created from 20 hertz up to 20 kilohertz, and hence the 2020 term. So I got a nice set of 2020s here, and they're nice. They represent the sound pretty well, and it's pretty flat right across the spectrum, and it's good for writing music.
That's fantastic.
But when you play that music somewhere else, like, you know, you've written something, you've probably done the same. You write it, you take it to your friend's car, you listen to it, and it's like, oh, hang on, that doesn't sound anything like, everything's all over the place. I have to EQ the tracks all over again. And putting copies in of one sound pitched up into another area will usually get rid of those problems. But because you were right the first time. What's weird is, have you ever heard electrostatic speakers? The ribbon speakers?
Yes.
They sound truly amazing and three-dimensional.
They're hard to find.
They are extremely hard. I heard them at a demonstration at a trade show once. And I thought what they were able to produce was analog. They were producing real analog sounds. And they sounded amazing, but I still felt, you know, one, you don't find them anywhere, they're too expensive. And once the wallet drove where the market went. And I've yet to find a speaker that does it. You're right, I have to agree with you. Bose, fantastic, yeah? They still price themselves as a premium product, and it's difficult to buy them as, you know, a cheap entry-level thing. I like Boston Acoustics myself.
Oh, yes, as do I.
Yep, and there's a whole bunch. So not putting any of the speaker manufacturers down, and we know that each one of them has a market for their product, but it is quite a unique thing when you're so into trying to get what it sounds like, and that projection method that is utilized to emulate what it is that was on the recording. I would prefer that it reproduced it rather than emulated.
Yeah. It's just so hard with digital. Maybe I'm just still so old school, but you know, I remember when, again, 10 years ago or so, photographers, professional cameras were coming out on a digital end where they could start using them on an everyday basis as opposed to their high-end film camera. And I knew a few photographers because I lived in LA as well for a number of years.
Awesome.
And you probably knew a few out there. There's quite a few photographers. They all swore off. I will never go digital.
Yeah.
Never. And it's the way digital moves. It moves so fast. In 2 years' time, if you're not digital, you're obsolete at that point. And
unless you got your own film processing lab at home.
Yeah, and you still need to work double time because I could send you an email and you print them. You know.
That's right.
But it was when the quality got there, and you know, they all say the quality's there, but you know, there's still a little bit lost, as they'll say. You know, there's still nothing like a good quality, you know, black roomed photography shot, you know, on good film paper. Yeah. And I think it goes the same with music too. I think a lot of the good artists will agree that it has wonderful benefits, but you know, there's a little bit lost too. There's a little bit. It's because digital has that sound. Or it takes away, you know, it eliminates all the background static, any background noise. It just it comes through hollow sometimes, I think. But but it's great to have. The convenience is incredible.
That's right. I would like there to be, and whoever can create this, go ahead and then send me one. Yeah. If you could create something that measured the room audio dynamically, EQ'd itself to produce a sound to eliminate all the reflections in the room using noise cancellation technology, so that what you heard was a true representation of what there was supposed to be heard, so that if you're an artist, the music you wrote, the music you recorded, is going to be played in whatever environment there is, the way that you intended it to be. It's almost like having, 12 bass lines in a track, all separated fantastically from each other, but complementing each other from a think about this from a electronica point of view. Having sounds that can only be heard truly with the best speakers for a personalized experience, yeah? And you hear it coming through that little mono speaker in a lift. Or someone's playing that song over their cell phone to you. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Everything about that song that was felt by the artist is lost.
Yes,
right? And
I agree.
That's the problem. I think that's, until we can get around that, digital's doing a good job, and we all live in that world, but, we're sort of at the moment a little reminiscing.
Yeah. Well, there's digital is a wonderful world, but I guess it's wonderful it's a good time for me, I guess, to be at this age while the digital age is changing, while I have children, because I remember what it was before, but I see so many children, and mine have been pretty good so far. They're not really tied to their cell phones like a lot of their friends are. But it's Dave, I'm seeing a lot. It's scaring me that nobody these children. It seems like they don't have a long-term memory, because they say I don't really need to remember this when it comes to school. I only need to remember it just until the test.
Yeah.
Because everything else I could find out as fast as I can type into my phone.
Wow.
And I'm just seeing it a lot where they say, I don't know. And I say, these are just basic things, But I'm worried. I'm really worried about it, because I'm seeing it a lot. And I'm just saying, these I'm speaking of 10-year-old children here. I'm worried what 5 years will do. Wondering where they'll be. But just a lot of the basic facts you grew up with knowing, they're instilled in you. Them. It's really not. I'm really not seeing that, and I'm worried. Hopefully, I'm wrong.
One thing about, I saw a YouTube clip, and it's poignant. It was a fellow walking down the street with a piece of paper in his hand with an address written on it. He gets to the T intersection of that street. It's houses on either side, and he doesn't know which way to turn. He asks the lovely lady that walks across the street, she goes, oh, you look lost. And he goes, yeah, I don't know where this is. She goes, oh, look, it's just down this way. And they walk for 25 meters or, say 50 yards or whatever down the street, and they chat along the way. His YouTube video is amazing. He ends up, dating her for a while, gets married, has some children, has grandchildren, and then he says, well, that was when I was growing up. What about today? And the same fellow walks down with his cell phone with the GPS on, turns the corner, and walks to the address. Meanwhile, this girl walks him by. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't have that interaction, which is what I think people are losing. I think we're losing this person-to-person contact.
Just just yesterday I was talking about just this, where see, I know we literally are on opposite sides of the world.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, growing up, 25 years ago, when I was on my parents' street they lived on, we knew every other household and their names. We knew their families personally, what their parents did for their in jobs, employments, and not in a nosy way, but you interacted. It was your neighborhood, your community. You knew everyone. And then today, I'm in a world where very few people really know their neighbors. They really don't. It's people here. It's where we used to have let's say a particular street would have every summer a party, and everyone would interact. But it's not that way anymore. It's everyone's very, very closed up and personal in a way. It's more of don't tell your neighbor anything, when it used to be the other way around. It used to be an open door thing where you need to borrow some sugar or you need this. It was no big deal. But today, here, that would almost be a strange thing to do, to go and ask your neighbor for something like that.
I think they'd stare through that little hole in their door with the lens on it, thinking, what do they want? What do they want? I don't know who are they?
That's how it is. It's really how it is.
Go away! I'm on Facebook. People are honestly trending towards anonymity. So they're trending towards anonymity, even though we're believing that we call it social. So even though we think we're being social, we're really not. In my street, we still, still have a street party at Christmas, and we try to, keep the friendship of the street and the neighbours and who we are, and we introduce ourselves to new neighbours. Yeah, not in what was that movie with the guy from Ferris Bueller, the Stepford Wives.
Matthew Broderick.
Yeah. So in that movie he was in, the Stepford Wives, it's not quite that twisted and strange, but we do try to keep up, that's the social niceties that we expect, because we all have children, we all live in the same street, and we really want there to be, the trust. We want to know who the other people are. And once you lose that, it's gone.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't want, everyone would like to live across the street from 1,000 Mrs. Kravitz. And that's showing my age. So from Bewitched, the nosy neighbor across the street peering out through her curtains was Mrs. Kravitz. And
that was a great show. I'm just old enough to know it.
Yeah. So thanks very much. She kept the street in line because she would call the police or call the authorities if something weird happened. And she was always keeping an eye out. Now, we all want people to keep an eye out for us, but if we're all, have our face buried in, and I'm using this term literally and intentionally, buried into our mobile devices, we won't see what's going on. Now, there was a case in New York of a subway shooting. Someone on the subway was filmed by the subway camera on the train, pulling a gun out, waving it round, putting it back, taking it, giggling to themselves, and they shot the nearest person. Wow. When they put the gun back, everyone looked up from their devices and hadn't seen a thing. And it wasn't because they were pretending, they had the footage. And the judge, looking over the case, said he made his statement at the end, his closing remarks were that it's this day and age. The day and age has turned us into people who, if we weren't buried in our portable devices, the murder may not have occurred because that person may not have pulled the gun back out. They would have been seen. They would have looked around and been seen and chosen a different path for themselves. So I think that's an extraordinary world that we live in if we're going to be doing that kind of stuff. Certainly in the big cities, anonymity is rife. But certainly if you're in the suburbs or further rural, you know your neighbour. And try to keep that up and build that community that Hawke talks about all the time. I'm a big supporter of that.
I agree. It's becoming a lost way to live, really. At least here.
Mm-hmm.
But you brought up another thing, and we are on opposite sides of the world.
Yep.
But we're on opposite hemispheres. Also, you're the southern hemisphere, so your Christmas, that's your summer. Your hot season, right?
That's right. And a bad rendition of this is "In Summer" from Frozen.
So that must be that. See, to me, that would be a tough one to adjust to. I think.
Oh, but you
It's
can't
tough
have,
because
you
we're
can't
so
have a
used to
roast.
it being so cold.
Yeah, there's no roast dinner. You try it, but usually you're sweating from all your pores just because it's 40 degrees or 110 or 104 degrees, Fahrenheit. It's usually too hot to do that. You want to eat
Does
that
it
late.
get that hot where you are?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a newspaper article next to me where we hit 44 degrees, which is,
Wow.
like 114 or something.
Just this year?
Last year was the hottest two temperatures on record. So it broke once and it broke it again last year.
Wow.
So last year, we've only got a few, like maybe 30 seconds to the break.
Okay.
But last year we had the hottest month, the hottest quarter, the hottest 6-month period. We had the hottest day. We had the hottest year. All of those records were broken last year. Now, Mekki and I talk about this, but we wouldn't have had those if climate wasn't changing. There would have been, we just wouldn't have them. If we would just have the ordinary days. The extremes wouldn't be stretching out like the rubber band that they are. So, you're back with David Mekki Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com. That's right, the number one listener-supported talk radio on the net. Since it is listener-funded radio, if you like what you hear, please go to freedomslips.com and push the donate button in the site support page. It's on the left in the chat, as I mentioned, right before the break. Your donation is greatly appreciated and helps run this station. Yes, help support our airtime, as Hawke so rightly puts it. I'd like to say hello to all of our new listeners, of course. We're doing hi from Chris.
That was good.
Thanks, man.
That was great.
Yes, that's Ruby. We are glad you're all on board. So I'm talking about our Twitter, our Facebook, and our YouTube. Also, the people who have got our application, just look for Shiny Side Out in any of your mobile platforms stores and get that. You can have a look at all of our stuff. We can talk to you. You can talk to us. It's pretty cool. All right. It even gives you access to some of the nice sweatshirts and things that we've made, mugs. Whilst we can't see the video today because XSplit is up and died on me, I've got my 500 ml or 20 ounce coffee mug, which I've gladly and gratefully consumed right before the show. It's a great mug. Trust me, you'll like it. If you're a coffee drinker, you'll really like it. If you like soup, yeah, it'll probably be good for that too, but who cares? Mekki isn't with us today, unfortunately. But so gratefully and respectfully, Joe has been for the first hour. I'm not sure that Joe can hang on for the whole time. He's welcome to if he likes. Yeah, thanks, man. I'll try and keep it exciting for you. And that's all he needs. It's almost almost 4 o'clock in the morning.
If you do the rest of the show like Christopher Walken, I might be able to make it.
Oh, why you want to do that? Kidding. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I've got two things to overcome. One is that I'm Australian, and the second is trying to talk like him in the phrasing. It's quite complicated.
You do a lot better than I would do.
There's two people that do it much better than me that are friends of mine, One, if you look on the internet, on YouTube, look for a guy called Sung Hero. He's fantastic at it. He can talk for like 40 minutes continually as Chris. And he does an exceptional job. I think he was a bit better in his early days. I want to actually have a roundtable, Christopher Walken roundtable, with a bunch of impersonators. Yeah.
Such a unique speaker. I mean, as you know, you've been here to the States, but there's no one even here that speaks like him. You know,
No.
I don't know how his timing got so thrown off. I don't even know how someone gave him a shot in Hollywood for a career speaking like, you just wonder. So it says, I don't even understand what you're talking about. Your timing's completely off. For a guy who can't talk, his timing is so terrible. I don't know how he's such a good dancer. His timing's right on.
Do you know what? It's almost like he's a musician, but because when he has words to say, if you were to talk like this and say the words and you're putting words in a time, it's rhythmic. But what he tends to do is he says a whole bunch of them together, leaves a big gap, says a couple of things, and then tries to fit all of the gaps in later on in the sentence. So he tries to fit they were all missing. I need to say some more. It's like a drummer who you said, like, we want 4/4, and he plays 1. And then he leaves a couple of gaps, and he goes, "Oh, I forgot. I've got to play 3 more." It's hilarious.
Exactly right.
It's hilarious. I love his work, and the only reason people impersonate him is because it's respect.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And he's a classic. There's a new one where someone goes to his house and they end up baking a chicken, but they have to go down to the market to buy all the stuff, and it's just funny. I can't put it into words. I have a look at that. I think it's called Baking with Christopher or something like that. It's hilarious. Hilarious.
Yeah, he always gets me going. He's a good one. Even in comedies, it's hard to imagine him, but he's good. He's good.
Watch.
He's a legend.
The well of watch mass. Hilarious. Like you can't write better. I think you couldn't intentionally do it. It just has to flow with him. My plan was to have a bunch of impersonators at a round table and throw it to the first one, then to the next one, then to the next, and actually have Chris on as last. And so the listener wouldn't be able to determine which one was or wasn't him. They wouldn't really know he was on board. And then as, no, I'm Spartacus. No, I'm Spartacus. That kind of funny thing towards the end of the round table, whatever the short round table would be, we would declare that it really was him. Yeah.
Right.
And he'd be the one who gets up at and I'm trying to pitch it to his agent, but it costs money to have him on the show, and we don't have that kind of money. So hopefully, if he's good-humoured enough and he hears some dry runs at it, I think he might be on board. So one day, I keep my fingers crossed.
Yes. It'll happen.
Yeah, and the other guy who does a tremendous version of him is Tones.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. If you can get Tones, if you know Tones, you'll still hear his voice in a lot of the bumpers. He's been a bit quiet. He's taken some personal time from the station for a little while, but I'm sure he'll be back. And he's a great friend of mine, and he does a really good job at it. And he was the one who inspired me first to do Christopher Walken's impersonation. I never did it before until I met Tones. So it's only been 2 years that I've been playing with it. And
cool.
I went to my friend's house. It's really funny, right? I went to my friend's place. I had a 6-pack of beer, and I went over to their place, and we were just going to sit and watch a couple of videos, a couple of movies. And people still do that, right? And I like hanging out. They're great friends, and they asked me a question, and I don't even remember what answer I gave because it wasn't even relevant. But the answer I gave was appropriate for their question. But I don't know how I said it. And they both looked at me. They go, "You just did it." And I said, "Did what?" And they said, "Hi, it's Chris." And they said, "You spoke like Christopher Walken. You just did it then." I said, "What?" And it was only in hindsight, I sort of had to play it back in my mind what had happened. And sure enough, there it was. And I realize I've even done that in meetings at work.
Wow.
So when you're trying to experiment with something, I think maybe it comes out from time to time. Like, either the way you're playing with the timing in a sentence, see how it works. I don't know. It's pretty funny. It's like if you pick up a guitar, you're not always going to play the same thing. At one point, your brain's going to go, I want to play this. And so it'll have a little noodle for a while.
Yeah. Or you change speed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was one thing I wanted to bring up. You post a lot of stuff into YouTube, and it's great.
I do.
You do.
Thanks, man.
Out of all my friends, you're in the top 3 of people who post stuff that I like, and I attach myself to it pretty quickly because I think a lot of really important topics coming through.
Thank you.
And awareness, you've got to spread awareness, yeah?
Yes, very much so.
Mm-hmm. And just before I get to one of those topics, I wanted to say one of my friends posted a thing today, actually, about MH370. Now, we all know what it is. I don't have to go into it. But it was a person who examined the audio from the what's it called? The aircraft controller, the ACT. So between the aircraft and the controller, the audio tape, the audio of that conversation had been released, and he loaded it up and he had a look in his audio program, and you can see the WAV file and the structure of it, and it's extraordinary that halfway through it, despite there not being a change of the operator or anything, there is a change of the background noise in the clip. There's also clear parts that have been deleted from the recording as well. So where there's zero background noise, and then suddenly the background noise starts up again, and then you hear the audio. And at one point, it actually sounds like it's being recorded by putting it up near a speaker and playing it back out, like they've recorded a dummy session of audio, and to try and replicate the original sounding broadcast between the two, the aircraft and the controller, they've tried to mimic it by putting it through sort of like a speaker and then recording it through the microphone of like either a cell phone or something else, because you hear them knock about a couple of times in the room. So
I'm unfamiliar with all of this.
Yeah, so what I'll do for you, I'm going to paste that into our chat. I'm also going to paste it into the chat room at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
All right. And I think you're going to find this an interesting thing. There's two things that come from it. One, it was just simply a mistake. It doesn't sound like a mistake, and as we acknowledged in the first hour, we're audiophiles. We like the sound of music. We know what it is. We can hear whether something has an effect or not, dry or wet. And all of those things have been established. When you listen to this, you can definitely hear the differential between what seems to be manufactured conversation and what was real conversation. You can also visually see in the YouTube clip down, I think if you scroll down, that there are complete gaps where while there isn't, and this is the same audio that you can get, right? There is zero background sound. So you'll always have a background something.
Yes.
Yeah. And so either it's hum or it's, off the X, Y. I think is it off Y? So it's maybe plus or minus 1 or 2.
Right, it should be Y, and if I'm hearing you correctly, we should have a fairly constant background noise, or at least similar throughout, right? Is this all coming from the same microphone?
Bingo. But yet it isn't. And then you hear it change. Suddenly the background noise is amplified by heaps, and it's a different sound. You can hear them. The way that they talk is a little different, but it seems like it was maybe rehearsed or intelligently because it isn't. It was found out. But it does look like it's been manufactured, right? Now, what that presses to me is if you're trying to manufacture news or trying to hide it by deletion, what is your goal? And then why were you doing it? So one of the questions that comes up with me is, why is there gaps? There shouldn't be gaps. There's some like 45 second of absolutely nothing when there is clear communications occurring. And then in one of them, they're cut off. They were talking, they introduced, 370, but that's it. It stops. Whereas it's normally every return backwards and forwards between the controller, and it's all there in the newspaper, in that news article, and the experts that are reviewing them. You'll hear them if the aircraft controller, the ACT, says 370, blah blah blah, and they give them a command. 370 then have to answer with 370. And then repeat back the command, and then say affirmative or negative, whatever it is. They have to answer it, and they have to answer that. They have to provide both the question and the answer, so the controller can confirm two things: one, what the outcome is, and two, whether they heard them correctly. Now that doesn't happen. It's been faked. So some of this is real, and then some of it's faked, and you can hear the intentional fakery and the deletion. The deletion occurs in the real information, or the fake. We don't know which one it is. So maybe I'm going to put this out there. Let's run a scenario and see how it fits. Imagine if they reported an inbound, 370, whatever it's called, Ho Chi Minh 370, blah blah blah. So they're calling Ho Chi Minh Airport. They want to make an announcement about something. And then they're cut off. Maybe they were trying to announce something. We've got an inbound. Is there any other traffic? They could be asking a question. Is there any traffic at 35, which is 35,000 feet? Or they could say 400, depending on where they are. So they could ask those questions, and they look like they might have been deleted. That would be it's an oncoming plane, or there's an incoming plane, or I'm seeing something out the window. Seeing something out the window could be an inbound missile. It could be a mistaken military exercise. We've seen that before. It could be a UFO. I'd love it to be a UFO. That'd be awesome. Any of those things, why would they cut it out? Maybe they're doing some serious spraying there. Maybe the reason why they're hiding the whole thing is because it's the chemtrail plane they hit. And the oil slick wasn't from a vessel, a Navy vessel. Maybe it was literally from the planes, and they just covered it up. Oh, don't worry about that down there. We look over on that side of the planet for the plane while we clear it up. I don't know what it is.
I don't know why the need to censor that. To any degree, I would imagine. I would just imagine seeing the release of every second of that tape.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a lot of families that deserve these answers right away.
This is the ninth week now, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we censor it, what would anyone censor it?
What do we accomplish by censoring it? Yeah. So. Apparently, there's a lot of, and look, Sindolo, I have to say, it's Sindolo in the chat room. This is an interactive show. So Sindolo in the chat room says, and I quote, Dave, with all due respect, before it's news cannot be trusted. You can tell from just the graphics and sleazy commercial content the story doesn't have merit. Well, that I saw it earlier someplace else, a more respectable site. It doesn't matter where it comes from. I'm quoting actually not the story within Before It's News, but the actual YouTube clip and the audio and the expert that's doing testimony over the audio. And
I see. You just read that here.
Yeah. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at that. I've read through the story. I take what they say on board, but it doesn't, mind the pun, but I'm not processing it as factual. I never do that. At the moment, the only thing factual is that at whatever time it was that it disappeared off the radar, it disappeared off the radar. That's the end of the factual content of this entire mystery. There isn't any more. I saw a CNN site and they had like some, 15 facts, and some facts started with maybe and I believe. They're not facts. Facts don't have statements. Yeah.
They're suggestive.
Exactly.
At best. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was hilarious. I couldn't believe what I was watching. But with this one, look, Sindolo, our listener, everyone listening to this, Sindolo's a chat room mainstay, part of the furniture, awesome work. It contributes to all the conversations, and I agree with Sindolo that we should all be maybe a little skeptical when we're reading anything about anything on this internet that we have. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Sindolo.
Yeah.
Hi.
And do your own research, and don't just trust one website. So, Mekki and I say the same thing, and so we've got your back, right? It's all good. So, I just think I keep trying to come up with ways and reasons, and is it that they're just trying to hide the fact that there is another Bermuda Triangle called the Red Triangle?
Well, what do you think? What's the most logical thing for you as to where the occurrences with this plane? Really, not so much the whereabouts, because it could have moved 10 different places if it was not
9 weeks. It could have flown around the world a couple of times.
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah.
But you get a whole other set of news releases than we get. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, is there anything, because overall the way I see it is there's 20 theories and every one of them is completely different than the other. And really none of them have any weight to stand on, really. Mm-hmm. It's really the plane it's just gone.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. I know they find debris, they had pings and signals, but none of them. Yeah. That's just what you hear that day. That's what's released that day, but it's no longer withstanding credible evidence the next day or 2 days later. It's they've got nothing. They've got nothing.
Yeah, and that's honestly the frightening thing. We all know that your cell phone can be tracked. You can go to a website. You can put some software on your phone, and you can find it anywhere. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It just doesn't matter. As long as it's within a cell phone tower somewhere and turned on. But the thing is, for me, what would the aviation business do if, this is a big question, if another one disappeared? Mm. That would be the end of it. Commercial flights would be ground to a halt. They would be pointing their finger at something else. If it just disappeared and there was no wreckage, it honestly disappeared. One of the Abydos Temple, you're across that?
Yes.
The lintel in the Abydos Temple, it clearly shows what looks like a modern day current silhouette, outline of something looks like a Black Hawk helicopter. You show anyone today and they know immediately what it is, and it doesn't look like a 1970s Bell helicopter. It looks like a Black Hawk. It's apparent. What's weird about it is that if we had have gone in any other direction and not built a helicopter, we would never have known what it was. And the reason for that is that we went from what looked like a landing space module to creating something that had a rotor in the tail. And the rotor in the tail is really important for counter rotation. Mm-hmm. And the respective size of the area that the blades in rotational speed is proportional between the front blade and the rear blade. And if it doesn't just spin arbitrarily, it spins at a rate which is a proportion of the area of the front blade. Yeah, I hope you remember that next time it becomes important somewhere at a trivia competition. But the evolution of the helicopter may not have gone to the Black Hawk. We may have come up with anti-gravity well before that, never made one. What we saw on that wall was meant to be some stylized insect or something up until we made the Black Hawk. So until we made, like I'm saying, it's not the chicken before the egg thing. It's we didn't recognize what it was up until we made one. Then we went, oh, look at that. They're identical. And there's no other machine or product or anything that we could have made that would fit that. You can't say, oh, I made a desktop, blender. And look, that's what it is. Because the blenders don't look like that. So it's 100% proportional, 100% fit to the silhouette. And there it is on the lintel. And it was found back in the 20s, 1920s, nearly 100 years ago. And no one knew what it was. We didn't have helicopters. And it wasn't until we made them that we in hindsight, went, wow, that's a helicopter. Maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe there is the possibility of time travel and that it's happening. And that if you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, like any good sci-fi, you happen to stumble upon randomly in the sky a time portal that takes you back in time sometime. Who knows? And I think it's an amazing possibility that this is true.
As do I. I believe this is. I believe this is possible.
Because when they talk about the people who radioed in their last calls from the Bermuda Triangle, they said, the plane is suddenly engulfed in this cloud, and it was a clear day. Mm-hmm. I don't understand. It's swirling, and my gauges are all over the place. Well, if you're in a plane that's spinning out of control, you know it's spinning because the G-forces you experience. Yes, if you're flying completely pitch black, you've got to go by gauges. If there's no moon and you've got no reflection off the sea and it could be slightly clouded over, you wouldn't know, and you don't know what's up and down. If you start a slow descent, you really don't know that you're descending unless you can keep close eye on the altimeter. So, or your false horizon. So those things are really, really important when you're flying. However, when they report this tunnel-like cloud thing that's slowly turning and giving them a disorientation, and then suddenly they vanish. They either vanish or they turn up somewhere else, like that poor Cessna pilot flying to Florida.
Yeah,
he ended up an hour early. And he's got, logged flight times from the aircraft controllers, and voila, his plane can't go that fast, and yet there it is. I think these things exist. Imagine if the poor people who were involved in the time travel things through the Bermuda Triangle, through whatever energy system creates it, they happen into it by happen chance or happenstance, and then all of a sudden find themselves in exactly the same point in space but not time. Maybe 100 years earlier. They run out of fuel. They're lost. They don't know where they are anymore. Yeah, it was a bit of an experience. Then later on we find the aircraft at the bottom of the sea. Or the ship for that matter. They had a ship go missing or a plane go missing and sent another plane, it went missing, sent a ship. All the crew and all the people on board went missing. Like what? Where did they go?
That was a big one for me with the rescue plane, right? The search plane. I think it had maybe 6 to 10 people on that plane, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. An entire crew, and that plane's gone.
So,
but they haven't found any of those planes.
No.
They found hundreds of planes. I remember seeing something where they found a group of 5 fighter planes all together in a prime target area. However, these were not the 5 planes.
Exactly.
But they didn't know where these 5 planes had come from. These were unaccounted planes.
That's right.
But not the same 5. It was just another strange series of events.
That's right. I remember seeing that. And they found the flight numbers, the plane numbers didn't match.
Yeah.
And they thought they were right on it. They go, oh, look, they'd somehow teleported 1,000 kilometers north or something. And since then, they were disorientated. They didn't know which way land was anymore, and they just ran out of fuel. That was what was suspected. And then they stumbled upon these 5 planes and went, what? Another 5?
But I agree with you. Sending the search plane out and then a ship, a vessel to do the same, and to have them all just disappear is quite profound. Usually something would turn up by now.
Exactly. Now remember that one instance can be chance. 2, something's going on. Still possible that it's only chance. 3, there's something really going on. So I think that adds it up. Now, you've probably heard of the Valentich case where the pilot in a Cessna again, or something small, I think it was Cessna, flew from Melbourne to King Island to get some seafood to come back again. A young pilot, but experienced. He radios back to the tower at Melbourne and says, there's lights. I can see that these lights, what are they doing? It was almost Christopher Walken. The lights, what are you doing? I'm flying here, And he complained about the lights being there. And then he said there was a huge ship. And then he disappeared. No wreckage found. However, I've been told by some Australian researchers who are still looking for the hard evidence of this, but they reported to me personally that a farmer in a field in Melbourne reported seeing a couple of days, the day after or something, but it wasn't in the media yet. The day after, he saw a silver-shaped, classic disc shape, but a large one, hovering over his field, and he's in an old tractor. He didn't have it. There's no mobile phones, no paper, and he's just on his tractor. So he gets, I think, the key, and he scratches into the paintwork what he saw. And what he was recording was the flight registration number on the side of the Cessna that was stuck like a magnet on the bottom of this large silver disc hovering over his farm. And when the plane registration details were announced in the media, they matched. It says it all. It says it all. So when MH370 was first announced into the media, I thought, I'm going to follow this thing. I'm following this case because it just doesn't happen. It's either shot down, it's crashed, it had a mid-air collision with something else, or it's a hijacking. Yeah, that's what we're known. These are known, criteria for a missing plane. So, scan for eyewitness accounts. Has anyone seen anything? Not really. What was Malaysia doing? Sitting on their hands or asleep at the wheel. Yeah, pretty much. Why?
Well, no, we didn't get the reports here until the plane would have already run out of gas or fuel, rather.
Yeah, that's right.
So I know I don't know if that was a worldwide press release, but
the first story came 4 hours after. That was the first one. Was 4 hours after.
It's a lot of time.
Yeah, so it could have already been anywhere, and of course we all know that they scramble after I think 15 minutes of non-communication. So if there's a plane in the air and it's not responding to requests, that you scramble the jet to make sure that the pilots are not in a hostage situation and that everyone's not frozen popsicles without oxygen.
Yeah.
Because of a loss of cabin pressure, at altitude. So those things happen, That's what it's all for. And, they're supposed to give a sign. There's special secret signs that they can do, wing tips or wind dips and and let them know, or turn on or off their flight landing lights or whatever it is. I can't give it away, but there's a little tip that they can do to the rendezvousing fighter pilot to not shoot them down because they're under intelligent control, not being hijacked. So something's really interesting about this. That didn't happen. No one cared less. They've got, apparently, in the first week, I thought this was really interesting. There was, they showed a dotted line of a radar track of an object that didn't have a transponder. So that when I say didn't have a transponder, it wasn't transponding, which means it doesn't reply back to the flight SMS system. It's not really SMS, but you have to think of it like that. The ground-based SMSs, who are you? The planes respond with their position, their location position, altitude, airspeed, and direction, so that you know who it is. It also has their flight registration number. So it could be plotted above and accumulated as data on the radar track. So when you see that on all the good movies, when you see the flight number there on the radar return, that's actually cumulative. They know where that is, who it is. Now there was an aircraft, I should say, there was a radar return coming in on a collision course with 370. On one of the news reports that I saw, the story was during the day, and it was pulled and never shown in prime time. And it crossed the path of 370 at the point of disappearance, and then continued. That's that first 120-degree turn. It wasn't the plane that made that 120-degree turn. It was this object. The object's continuous flight path past MH370. Could it have done the same thing as that poor Valentich case? Could it have put it into a bubble of communication? Could it have abducted the plane? I don't know. And then flown to the South Pole afterwards. Because if it was the actual plane, if it was MH370 that did this turn, and it had to fly over, and I've mentioned this a few times, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, it had to fly over two airports. One on the east coast, then another on the west coast. When it flies, if you've got a flight flying over a controlled airspace, such as an airport, for instance, yeah, they have to know what that flight is.
Yeah.
And that's what they didn't do. No one did it. I reckon that whatever that was either military or not of this earth. That thing that either collided with it or did whatever it was going to do, abducted it. Or it was a time portal. Who cares? And that whole thing was fabricated. I don't know. Because you can't have a news story that changes every single day.
Right.
And then just vaporizes as not news. It's not news anymore. Who cares, really?
Yeah.
How about the crisis actor complaint as well, that, all of those relatives were just crisis actors?
Well, I mean, if the plane was hijacked, mm-hmm. or if the pilot had his own plans, mm-hmm. flying over two airports is risky business in either scenario.
Which doesn't make sense.
Right. It wouldn't have been a well thought out plan on either end to double back over one airport, never mind two.
Because they can track you. They know the beat. If someone was actually watching it, they would have seen what the flight number was.
It's too much of a risk.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to jeopardize your plans if you were doing something nefarious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So my guess is that it continued on in either the free scale cloaked mode, which has become so popular these days, because even those relatives of the free scale employees who were interviewed seemed indifferent to the fact that their relatives may never be seen again. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's my brother. What? Oh, he's possibly dead. Yeah, well, What? Did you hate him or what? Is it Thanksgiving? You know, what are you doing? These people didn't seem distraught. Their body language didn't match that of someone who was truly grieving, or has that missing hole, the hole of non-closure. So I couldn't believe it.
It's been a long time to 9 weeks. You say that's about right. To really have nothing to work on. There's really nothing. It's what it boils down to. There's nothing I hold credible, at least.
There was a reverend, and I forget his name. I'm so sorry, everyone. I found a YouTube clip, and he would so be a tremendous host on this station. He's so super passionate, and if anyone looks through my Facebook posts, they'll find it. Extraordinary fellow. I've even asked for an interview with him. He's a reverend. He's African American. He's very outspoken. He's passionate about it, and he said all the same things that we talk about: conspiracy, New World Government, Illuminati, and MH370, all in the same sentence. Extraordinary. And I've got to be. I'm watching it, and my smile was growing as I'm listening to this fellow talk about it, and I didn't have an outcome. I didn't walk away from it with anything, but this guy is so awesome. And I've run out of superlatives. And I messaged him and, see where that goes. But even he was a religious man, even he was doubting that the governments of the world were telling the truth. And he's a man of the Bible, and he's completely doubting all of it. He said there's no way in the world that we could lose a plane. Now, for me, what screams odd in the whole thing was Rolls-Royce saying they knew the plane's engines ran for another 4 hours because of the telemetry they received. And that is really bizarre. So if those engines were running, where was it going?
Yeah.
So
I just don't buy the flying to the South Pole. The pilot just turning the plane and just going full force to the South Pole.
Yeah. It
just really. It seems like the last thing that I would pin it on, just so many other things I would come up with first.
Yeah.
Why fly 6 hours to put the plane in the ocean if you could do it right now?
He could have just pushed forward on the stick. And
that's it.
And that's it. He could have ended the flight then and there at 2:14 a.m.
Yeah.
I know. So, none of it made any sense. Now, last week we had on the show, let me see if I can remember who it was. Boy, oh boy. Oh, he knows who he is. We had him on the show last time. I'm sorry. I'm so useless. Let me see if I can. Billy Hayes. Thank you, Billy.
There you go.
Yeah. So we had Billy Hayes on, and he worked at Boeing, and he was an engineer, and he said that that little dome, it's tiny, and it's more towards the rear of the aircraft. It's past the wings towards the rear of the aircraft. It sits on top, and that's their communications device. And behind that are a number of UHF or VHF aerials. I can't remember which. And he said that there was actually a recall done on that cowling that holds that dish underneath. It's a little kind of domey thing, and that it could have failed. Now, if it failed, they could have lost a number of things, but because it was so far back in the fuselage, it was past the wings. And like the backbone in our backbone, each segment of our backbone brings nerves to our body, and if you break a certain nerve at a particular point, you can be paraplegic, or worse, you could obviously incontinence. And I'm sorry about the topic, but it could be worse. You could if you have it further up your spine, you can cause quadriplegia. So depending on where it failed on the aircraft, you would have a loss of systems from there backwards, from the pilot's perspective. And I don't think, when I looked at the aircraft and the way it was constructed, I don't believe that it would have peeled back the fuselage to that extent to have a loss of cabin pressure overall and a loss of flight control. With the backup systems and the backup power, while I agree with Billy that it is a failing point, it's a point of failure, and it would have caused a loss of communication with the aircraft, I don't think that we would have seen the extent of loss, and they could have taken it to one of the two airports that they flew over, or any of the other airports. There's 12 airports within an hour and a half of their position in the sky, and they could have landed at any of those. So I doubt a mechanical failure in the aircraft. So with me, I'm left with hijacking of some kind. That Diego Garcia thing seems completely plausible. How about you?
Well, it does. Did you hear anything about Diego Garcia unloading all their citizens from the island?
Yeah, completely. It was in the 70s. They actually did that. They exported them all. They deported them to England, and they originally, for 6 months, withheld food from them until they came crawling to them to deport them. That was England. It's actually the British Indian Ocean Territory, yeah.
Now, is there no one living on that island, civilian-wise, besides military installations?
Correct. It's a controlled space, yes. It's military only.
Well,
maybe not anymore. Maybe there's a few civilians living there today.
I'm not buying the mechanical failure either, just because the way all the information was turned off on the plane. The transponder was turned off where he wouldn't have had enough time to get down to sea level before the transponder was turned off. They lost signals pretty much abruptly, which I know would happen if you hit the sea, but that would not have been the case here. It said it was they were there and then they were not there.
Also, the ACARS system and the telemetry feed was still live up until that point. So Rolls-Royce complained or stated that they still had telemetry for another 4 hours, which means that they knew exactly where the aircraft was.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't match. That's inconsistent with the information from either the Malaysian government or any of the other militaries around. They all suggest that it's a military issue and we're sitting on our hands or withholding information for military reasons.
But there's no agencies that are together on the same opinions, are there?
No, there's not.
I mean, I really can't recall the last time I've seen such a mess. It's it's almost better if they just said nothing at this point. Yeah, because Dave, I think every day I woke up to the news and it was breaking news on the case every day, but by the end of the day, that news was no good.
Exactly.
And it was every day. It was breakthrough, and it was no good. No good.
Yeah, one of the things that I really appreciated was having an active pilot sitting in the simulator cockpit, describing what switches were where and what people would have had to have done to something. Yeah, let's just broadcast that on the TV. So if you want to hijack a plane, turn those buttons off.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, fools. But what I appreciated was that they're very, very clear in what they're not saying. So it's deafening what they're not saying, and that is what they are saying. First, they're saying that if it was two planes, they would have had a loss of a second plane. That's the fact from the clearly facts from an active pilot. He said that those switches have to be turned off. He said you have to turn them off. a system failure in a cockpit can't affect one and then later on another one. He said that they run from dual power and they've got battery backups, and so you couldn't have had a failure in the cockpit that would have been a cascade fault that would have got from one to the next. There isn't a system on the board that would allow that, which I think is extraordinary. So he counts out mechanical failure immediately. Yeah.
So it would have had to have been manual disengagements, right?
Well, that's what they say. What's deafening is he's still relying on the feed from the Malaysian government saying that they had turned this stuff off. But what's really strange is the ACARS detail. The ACAR detail databases all around the world, which replicate the same detail everywhere, is missing flight 9M-MRO. Look it up yourself.
Say that one more time.
It's 9M for Mary, dash, Mike, Romeo, Oscar. That is the flight registration number of that plane.
Okay.
The sister plane is 9M MRI, and that's in Tel Aviv, parked. Strangely, oddly enough, from November. So this flight registration number is the plane stamped registration number on every single component on that aircraft. It's stamped on it. So literally thinking is that they keep telling us that there wasn't, I want to keep the roll happening, there wasn't a malfunction physically, that there would have been another aircraft reported missing if it had collided with something else. Now, they wouldn't even mention that if there wasn't another aircraft flight radar return. They would have said, clear skies, no other aircraft within Kui, everyone's in their lanes, done. But that's not true. They had another radar return, on an incoming path to them. So it's what they're not saying. They're very positive about what they are saying, but it's like buying a used car. He doesn't want to tell you the brakes don't work, but he says the brakes were serviced recently. He doesn't say the brakes are fantastic. Stops on a dime, yeah. Like advertising glossy brochure, it tells you what you want to hear, and not all of the downfalls for the product. And I really think that that's what we're missing out on. And I want you to use that approach next time you're listening to them talk about it. Revisit some of the footage from the first week and have a listen to the way that they're very cunningly or carefully telling you what is real and what isn't real about it. And what they're not telling, what they omit is very important.
They're very good at choosing those words, aren't they?
They are.
Yes, yes.
And I saw them defend themselves. The three, we call them Larry, it's the Three Stooges, right?
Okay. The
Three Stooges, they're being interviewed. Why did they not have the air traffic controller there?
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Because he could have answered questions. If you just have frontmen, they can't answer particularly. Oh, we'll get back to you, and they never do.
That's exactly right.
I heard people. We're just about to end the show, but I heard people asking questions in Malaysian and it being translated over the air on a live